good is your favorite NFL team after 13 weeks of the 2024 NFL season? Welcome back, football fans, to another week of BLV NFL Power Rankings, ranking every NFL team from the worst, number 32, to the best team in the NFL, a new number one in this video. We have some changes at the top of our power rankings, and I'll get to the reasons why once I get there. But before I do, spike the like button and don't forget to subscribe for weekly NFL power rankings just like this. The most honest, the most brutal, the most in-depth NFL power rankings that you'll find on the internet. Let's kick it off, guys. Let me know in the comments your opinion on your favorite team, the state of your favorite team. Should they fire their coach? Do they need a new quarterback? Are they going to win the Super Bowl? What's your thoughts on your favorite team? Let's get started with the worst team in the NFL, and that is, at number 32, the New York Giants. Honestly, I could have went New York and said either team. But for me, it's the Giants. They just lost their best player, put on IR, Dexter Lawrence. Drew Lock is currently their quarterback, and I didn't think Drew Lock was actually that awful on Thanksgiving. I think the biggest problem was their offensive line might be the worst in the NFL right now, especially without Andrew Thomas. They were missing as well their right tackle, Illuminor, and they couldn't block the Cowboys to save their lives. And that put Drew Lock under constant duress and forced a turnover, multiple sacks. They just couldn't have any rhythm offensively. And without a good offensive line, without a quarterback that's above average or even a starting caliber quarterback, it's really hard to overcome a terrible offensive line. Their defense is just atrocious in almost every manner possible. They were good at sacking the quarterback at one point, but now without Dexter Lawrence, their pass rush has taken a major hit. They can't stop the run. They haven't all season. They can't stop the vertical pass because they just don't have any corners that can cover anybody. This is a really bad football team. Like, awful. I do not understand how Mr. Shane can have a job after he failed to pay Saquon Barkley. He chose Daniel Jones to be their franchise quarterback, and he thought they had a good team, which he doesn't. Like, I think Brian Daboll is actually a decent NFL head coach, but he's dealing with one of the worst quarterback situations. He's dealing with one of the worst rosters in the NFL. It's just not a good situation. I kind of hope that he does end up leaving the Giants and goes somewhere else. Maybe becomes an offensive coordinator. Maybe becomes a head coach of a more competent team. Like, the guy has got a bad break, in my opinion, with the Giants because this is a really, really bad roster all the way around. So the Giants, they suck. They're the worst team in the league. There is nothing other than Malik Neighbors and Tracy to look forward to for Giants fans. At number 31, I have the Jacksonville Jags, especially with Mac Jones being their starting quarterback instead of Trevor Lawrence. The funny thing is, though, that Mac Jones actually, I thought, played better than Trevor Lawrence against the Houston Texans. Maybe that's as simple as, like, the Texans were preparing for Lawrence and the offense of what Lawrence would bring, and they weren't really prepared for what Mac Jones would bring. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe Lawrence is just kind of rusty because he hadn't played in weeks, and then eventually he gets absolutely hammered, clobbered, knocked out of the game. Disgustingly, by the way. It was an awful hit. And then the Texans, we'll talk about them a little bit later, but their response to that hit was maybe even worse. But Jacksonville, they're just a bad team. I mean, there's nothing I really like about this team. They can't run the ball at an above average level. They can't stop anything on defense. Their passing game is pretty much Brian Thomas or bust. And that's it. I mean, the offensive line is, I guess, not catastrophic any longer, but it's not any good. And, I mean, the quarterback situation, like, Lawrence has not proven that he deserves the contract, and Mac Jones is just very limited. I mean, every time you watch him play, it's just he does not have the arm strength. He does not have the mobility. He does not have it in terms of being a starting quarterback. That's been clear the last season in New England. That's been clear in a new situation with Jacksonville. Doug Peterson probably has to go. I respect Doug Peterson for what he's done in the past, but it has not worked out in Jacksonville the last year and a half. And I wonder what he'll become for the rest of his career. If he ends up retiring, if he ends up maybe getting an offensive coordinator position somewhere, a quarterback coach position. I still think he should belong in the NFL. Maybe he goes back to Kansas City with Andy Reid or something. But yeah, the Jags are awful. This is the worst franchise in the NFL. It really is. I mean, I know that we're going to talk about the Jets, but Jacksonville is even worse, in my opinion. Like, yeah, the owner wants to win, but he puts no people in place in order to win. The GM has been there for no good reason forever. He's the worst general manager in the league. How many chances do you get? Like, honestly. So, at number 31, Jacksonville is awful. They suck. They're at number 31. At number 30, the Las Vegas Raiders. And I understand the Raiders almost beat the Chiefs, but that happens every season, so it's not going to move me at all. And the Chiefs suck, let's be honest. The Raiders are at number 30 because Antonio Pierce is the biggest jabroni walking in the NFL. He sucks. I still don't know what he's writing on the notepad. Like, if anybody knows what he's writing on the notepad, please let me know. I think he's writing his lunch order, his dinner. I don't know what he's doing. All right, Max Crosby and the defensive line is actually, I think, exceeding expectations right now, considering Christian Wilkins has been out for a majority of the season. They've had injuries to the defensive end position. I think Tyree Wilson's come on a little bit strong as well. Kayvon Chason had a huge game against Kansas City. He had a career game, a former first-round pick of Jacksonville, by the way. Their secondary's beat up, so we'll see how that tracks moving forward. But their defense played very inspiring against Kansas City. In terms of their offense, I thought Aiden O'Connell gave their offense a spark. He was throwing the ball down the field. And what I like about O'Connell as opposed to Minshew, he's a bigger, stronger player. You know, like, I like Minshew in terms of, I think he's good in terms of his accuracy, his keeping the offense on schedule, his mojo, so to speak, his aura. Like, a lot of players like Gardner Minshew, fans like Gardner Minshew, and I think he's easy to coach, and that's good for Gardner Minshew. But with Aiden O'Connell, he's a younger guy. He's a little bit more in his physical prime, and you look at him, and his arm strength is definitely there. We've seen that over the past couple of years. He can throw the ball, and he can throw the ball especially at the intermediate level with more power, more zip. He was actually unleashing it down the field. He hit on multiple big plays down the field to Tucker, to Bowers. And the running game also got sparked by youth as well, with McCormick coming in there against Kansas City. I'm intrigued to see if he's the starting running back for the rest of the year. The offensive line playing a bit better as well the past couple of weeks. But this is not an extremely talented team because I feel like they have holes at almost every level of their roster. Most essentially the quarterback position. I don't think O'Connell is their guy, but I do feel like he brought something different to the Raiders offense, which was more explosiveness and more kind of risk-taking, let's say. And then on top of that, the coach is an absolute jabron. So at number 30, I have the Raiders. At number 29, it's actually incredible that this team belongs around this range, considering what the expectations were before the season. But the New York Jets are absolutely catastrophic. I don't think there's any other word than catastrophic to explain the New York Jets. They fire Robert Saleh. Their defense falls off a cliff. Their defense, I mean, all these guys are underperforming except for maybe Quinnen Williams and Will McDonald. Like, everyone else is an absolute just, I don't know, what happened to Sauce? What happened to all these guys? Like, they're just not playing well at all. They're playing awful. The offensive line isn't very good. Breece Hall, honestly, like, he's fumbling the ball. Aaron Rodgers just is absolutely washed. Like, whenever you're done your dishes, bro, just say Aaron Rodgers and you'll get the hint. The wide receiving core, Adams is still pretty good. Garrett Wilson is good, but like, there's so many like disorganized targets, if you know what I'm saying. They get so many targets, but the reception percentage is so mediocre. It's like they'll get 12 targets a game and they'll connect on like 6 of them, each of them. That's just way too ineffective offensively. I mean, this is the most basic offensive scheme and basic defensive scheme in football. And I really think that's why the Jets suck. I don't think it's because Rodgers is the worst quarterback there is, like people are proclaiming. I don't think it's because they don't have the talent offensively around him. I don't think it's because the defense doesn't have talent. I think it really is what we explained before the year. If the Jets were going to fail, it was going to come down to coaching. And what they ended up doing was they fired their best coach on their staff. As bad as I thought he was previously, he was their best coach. There's no way around that. And then you go from already a bad coaching staff to one of the worst coaching staffs I've ever seen in my entire football life. This team has no creativity, no coordination, no scheme advantage at all. Like, everybody knows what's coming on offense. The defense is so basic. Like, it's just not a well-coached team. So at number 29, I got the Jets. At number 28, the Tennessee Titans. My goodness, this team, I absolutely can't I can't understand this team. It's been 13 weeks. I still don't get this football team. 1 week, they upset the Texans and they look great. You know, another week, they lose by 1,000 to the Washington Commanders. This team has been playing great defense all year, and they have their worst performance against Washington, a team that was playing pretty bad football before that. You know, Will Levis has actually played much better over the past month or so, and I expect him to play better, you know, than he did against Washington. I didn't think he was terrible against Washington, but I think that there's great matchups for him to finish this season strong. It feels like this ownership or something is really attached to Will Levis and the idea of Will Levis. But it doesn't feel like he's a guy that can take you anywhere into the future. So they're going to need a quarterback. The offense, I mean, if you're running the Zach Taylor Bengal program, you're in trouble. Like, this team is running the Bengals program. And at the end of the day, the Bengals are one of the worst, like, poorly coached football teams in the NFL. We'll talk about them soon. But the Titans are trying to replicate that with a much worse quarterback. Like, even though they have a better defense, it's not the way to go. The offensive line still struggling, especially at tackle. Their run game didn't get it going against Washington. Nick Westbrook-Akine just gets an automatic touchdown every week, so I guess there's that. And then, you know, they just look like they quit against Washington. They really did look like they quit. I hope they play a little bit better against Washington. So I don't know, like, they suck, bro. At number 27, the New England Patriots. The New England Patriots have the worst coach maybe in the NFL. I'm not sure if he's worse than Antonio Pierce. It's up for debate. It's really up for debate. I still don't understand why people are not talking about the fact that he took a timeout to get a Kodak of the offense of Indianapolis that was not going to snap the ball. They were panicking. They're inside your 5-yard line, and you take a timeout when there's 2 seconds left on the play clock. He doesn't challenge a catch that wasn't a catch. And then you had the refs with some of these missed calls on Christian Barmore, you know, on Christian Gonzalez. Like, terrible reffing in that game. The Patriots thoroughly dominated the Indianapolis Colts. They outrushed the Colts. They outpassed the Colts. They out-executed the Colts. And if not for a 27-yard missed field goal and, you know, a interception at the 1-yard line dropped by their best receiver, they would have blown out the Colts. Like, honestly, Drake May was superb, spectacular. The kid currently holds the record for most yards per rush for a quarterback in a season, beyond multiple Michael Vick seasons. The offensive line, I thought, played solid against the Colts, which was my biggest worry in the game. I thought Hunter Henry, I thought Bourne and Douglas and Booty, they all came to play. Gibson was his best game as a Patriot. The defense was really bad against the run. They couldn't get consistent push. They couldn't get consistent negative plays. The secondary was all right. I mean, Richardson is absolute booty cheek, so I expect it. But I mean, the coaching staff is so bad, and especially defensively. Like, there's so many plays that are so obvious. Like, the Colts, when they get into 4th and 2 or 4th and 3, they're going to run Anthony Richardson. You know that in the red zone, inside the 5-yard line, every time the game's on the line, they run Richardson. Like, is it not obvious? Just blitz the entire team. Like, on every 3rd down, every 2-minute situation, you should just be blitzing Richardson because the guy cannot read the field. He's not accurate. He can't get the ball out. Like, this team is so poorly coached on defense. I thought Alex Van Pelt actually had a really good game. I'm not going to lie. Other than the one series where they were way too conservative, which for all I know came from Mayo, I think he did a great job. Like, especially considering the talent. Again, guys, you got to consider the talent that he's coaching here. Like, I think he did a good job with the guys that he has. And maybe it's just Drake May is that good. I don't know, and he is really good. I thought that was his best game of his career so far, in terms of when he did pick to run, he ran well. He was extremely accurate. I don't think he missed a single throw in the entire game. He was making throws in terms of getting his receivers open in those passes. Like, the Austin Hooper throw was unbelievable. Just the placement of the ball, the precision when the Colts were, putting him under pressure. I felt like he just always had an answer. Every time they were in a bad situation, he came through. Like, the guy is going to carry our team probably next season, but we need to put a little bit support around him because honestly, if we put like a little bit of support around Drake next year, if it's a little bit of an offensive line, one receiver, a bit of a defense that's well coached, this team could honestly be like in the hunt by next year. Like, it wouldn't be surprising, especially given the state of the Jets, given the state of potentially Miami, we'll see, and just the entirety of the AFC in general. Like, I feel like there's like 5 good teams in this conference, and that's about it. So, yeah, the Patriots do have something to look forward to, but they're going to have a great offseason. This team is extremely frustrating, though, because it feels like if they had a better coach, honestly, if this team had Bill, they probably would win. They probably would have won like 7 games by now. I mean, they probably would have won like 6 or 7 games. They'd probably be like 500. You look at all the games they've blown. Like, the Colts, the Seahawks, the Dolphins, every week at number 26, we've got the Carolina Panthers. I must admit, Bryce Young has shocked me. I did not expect Bryce Young to all of a sudden look this good, but Bryce Young looks like the guy that played at Alabama and the guy that I thought would be a competent NFL starting quarterback, and that's what he has been, right? I never really thought he was better than Stroud. I was always Stroud first. And right now, he's probably playing better than Stroud, to be fair. But, like, I thought he had the things that he's showcasing in these games, right? Like, vision, the ability to be composed under pressure, the ability to buy a little bit of time, the ability to be accurate down the field. Bryce has shown those things. I think he's got a little bit better of an arm than maybe I gave him credit for, but he's doing a great job inside of Canales' offense. He's well protected, which is a big deal for him. I think Carolina's offensive line deserves a ton of credit. I think they have a solid running game that you have to respect because of Hubbard and what he's become. Unfortunately, he did fumble that ball in overtime. But the Panthers are a lot like the Patriots right now. Like, I don't think Bryce is quite going to be what Drake is, but they do have a much better offensive line and probably better receivers. I will say that Carolina and New England, they've got like a lot of the same sort of vibes in terms of, okay, we could look to the future and maybe have some good things, but I will say that their coaching has a lot more to do with their success, in my opinion, than the Patriots. I think the Patriots are more talented, especially on defense, but maybe not offense, but defense. But to me, like, Carolina, I think Canales has done a great job. I think Evero had maybe his best coached game of the season against Tampa. I thought he did a great job. And this could have done with the influence of Canales as well, understanding the Tampa offense, understanding Baker, where he likes to go with the ball, understanding Mike Evans, some of their personnel, like understanding their offensive line, like all those sort of things. I think Carolina really actually outcoached Tampa pretty significantly in that game. And if it were not for, a timely turnover, just the pure ability for the Bucs to just lean on the running game and be able to overpower and manhandle Carolina because their defensive line is trash, and for Baker just being clutch and doing his thing and Mike Evans being Mike Evans, the Panthers probably win that game. And even that being said, they almost stole that game until that fumble happened. So yeah, Carolina, they're coaching better. I think the team has an identity. I think the team has belief. I think that Bryce is playing more confident. That is clear. He's playing like every throw is on the money. Like he's making much better decisions. He's knowing when to run. He's knowing when to throw it away. He's doing a good job. Adam Thielen's back. He looked great in that game. And defensively, I just felt like the secondary played pretty sticky. They were in the right spots. They really struggle with the run, but I think the pass defense isn't too bad. So at number 26, Carolina, definitely playing much better football. A sneaky team down the stretch that could pretty much upset or play with anybody. We've seen that recently. They played well against Tampa. They played well against Kansas City. They've been playing good football. At number 25, the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys, I think the reason I've moved them up is their defense. I think their defense played very, very well against the Giants for the most part, and a lot of it has to do with the return of Micah Parsons. But I think Zimmer has found maybe a little bit of a rhythm with his blitzes and his pressure packages up front, and that gave the Giants absolute fits. Like the Giants could not block the Cowboys at all, and I think their ability to get pressure on the quarterback has also, in some ways, helped their run defense. Their run defense has been a little bit less catastrophic as of late. Their offense, I think Rush has played a little bit better than expected, just in terms of knowing where to go with the ball, playing in rhythm. Rico Dowdle has played really, really well lately. The last couple of weeks, I thought he had a great game against the Giants. CeeDee Lamb is still CeeDee Lamb. Brandon Cooks with a huge touchdown. He played well as well. And I like these tight ends that they're finding. I mean, Schoonmaker played well. Ferguson will be back. They've had multiple tight ends contribute. The offensive line has still been pretty bad, but I feel like given the injuries, I mean, it's not as bad as you would expect. Zeke is absolutely washed, but it is what it is. Their secondary has been beat up all season. Their linebacking core, Overshown gives you a linebacker of the future. They're kind of hit and miss in the secondary, it feels like. I think some of that has been Diggs, coming back from the ACL, not being quite the same player. Bland being out a lot, them having to cycle through a lot of depth players. But at number 25, Dallas is definitely a way more competitive team. And I think Mike McCarthy is kind of proving that he's a decent coach. I think he's not a great coach, but I think he's proving that he at least gives your team a good floor. And I think a lot of the problems with Dallas this year has strangely been the roster. I don't really think it's been as much the coaching as people would think. So at number 25, I have Dallas. At number 24, the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts were very lucky to beat the Patriots. I mean, I said it with the Patriots. They got clearly outplayed, but I will say that the reason they won is because Shane Steichen was the best coach on the sidelines. That's the reason, right? Mayo doesn't know that you can coach players during the game. Once you get into the game, you're not allowed to coach, according to Gerard Mayo, the real words of Gerard Mayo. When it comes to Sirianni, his buddy Steichen, the last drive was masterclass. I mean, they had 19 plays on the last drive of the game, which I don't even remember a drive that went that long. It was absolutely brutal to watch as a Patriots fan because you just knew it was going to end in misery. And some of the play calls were obvious, but sometimes that's good, right? Like you lean into your strengths. Some of the play calls were good. To have a quarterback like Richardson who can barely complete passes, and when you're down in a game, have to throw the ball and find success to win, I think that's impressive coaching and impressive sequencing and play calling. I thought his ability to just kind of lean into Jonathan Taylor in the run game throughout the day was the correct call against New England. Everything he did felt like it made sense throughout the game. And going for two was also a huge reason they won. I feel like if that game goes to overtime, I'm picking Drake May over Anthony Richardson, every day of the week, the way that they were playing in that game. So to go for 2, that was the right decision to make. The Colts are still in the mix, and I think it's because Steichen has found a way to get the most out of whichever quarterback has been in there, the most out of the injured receiving core, the injured offensive line. The offensive line's dealt with a ton of injuries. The defense, I thought, had one of their worst games of the past 6 weeks. So they need to bounce back. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I don't know when Steichen's going to figure out that Gus Bradley is a very nice guy and might be a friend, but he is not a very good coach anymore. Okay? He just runs the same thing that he ran in 2013. It doesn't work like that anymore. So the Colts are a bad but not out of it football team. They're hard to explain. They're somehow in the mix despite not being very good. At number 23, the New Orleans Saints. The Saints, I thought, played very well in the first half against the Rams, especially offensively. They were able to move the ball. They were able to control the clock. They were able to outpossess the Rams, and they were able to, I thought, the Rizzler was out coaching McCabo up and down the field there. The Rizzler was coming up with a game plan, but the Saints could not capitalize. They've got check down Charlie Derek Carr, and I think he completed 3 yards an attempt, it felt like. The guy was just throwing the ball underneath every single play. The only big play that they made was the one to MVS. That was about it. I think that you got to give Kubiak a ton of credit for this team. He's been able to put together an offense that can move the ball and sustain drives, despite all the offensive line injuries they've had, despite Taysom Hill, he's going to go down now, despite not having any talent at receiver. I mean, no talent. MVS is their number 1 receiver. He was cut by the Bills. The Bills, who didn't have good receivers to begin with, right? And, Rashid Shaheed gets hurt. Chris Olave gets hurt. They don't have a lot of talent outside of Alvin Kamara, who's an actual starter in this league at their positions, right? So, yeah, I give them a lot of credit for that. I give Kubiak a lot of credit for that. The offensive line is playing better. Carr is playing solid, but he's just not aggressive enough. He's just so conservative. It's hard to win a game with him, especially in the red zone. The guy is catastrophic in the red zone. Defensively, they actually played pretty well against the Rams. They're not a good defense, but I thought Brzee played really well. I thought that the linebackers are solid, and I think they're getting a little bit better. I will say that, the last few weeks, they've been a bit better, it feels like, in their performance. This has been one of the more disappointing units in the entire NFL this year. It felt like the Saints are a lock to be a top 12 defense every season, but this year, they've been closer to bottom 12. So the Saints are out of it now, but they're one of those teams that I feel like they'll continue to play. They've got a lot of veterans on their team. They're a middling team. They can compete with pretty much everybody. It's just that they're not talented enough right now to really win a lot of these games. At number 22 is the Chicago Bears, who fired Matt Eberflus for good reason. But I don't think Caleb Williams is getting enough heat for what happened. Apparently, he actually was audibling or checking into a signaling to Rome Odunze, a different route, a stop and go potentially, is what I heard. I don't know if that's correct or not, but if that is bad. That is really bad. That is, something that he's going to need to learn. But you take the timeout after a sack every single time. That's rule number 1 in clock management. I just sometimes wonder, why do coaches not play Madden? They gotta experience it, man. They gotta go through the reps. You gotta play Madden. I'm telling you, it should be on the list of, if you hire a head coach, they gotta know game situations. They've gotta know when to call the timeouts. They've gotta experience these things. Madden's the way to go, man. I'm just saying. But Matt Eberflus, I think it's gonna be good for the future that the Bears move on. I mean, he's not a bad defensive coordinator, but it's not like he brings some sort of absolutely creative, otherworldly defensive system to the table. It's very mid, right? It's very vanilla. He was an awful coach on the road. His team really was just giving up on him. So it was time for a change. The Bears, though, I think the bigger underlying storyline is they continue to build their team like they play in Indianapolis. Like, I know that Eberflus is from the Colts, but Ryan Poles built this team like he's playing in a dome every week, like he's in Arizona or something. Like, the offensive line and the defensive line are the two biggest weaknesses on the team. He just had no connection for how to build Matt Eberflus a football team. Like, if I was the general manager of the Bears with Eberflus, you should understand what you need for this defense and this offense to work. Like, it's a defensive coach. You play in Chicago. What do we need? It's a defense that's predicated on four-man pressure. If you don't have a good pass rush, you're not going to be successful. The Bears have a very mediocre staff of defensive linemen. It's just a fact. Outside of Montez Sweat and I guess Andrew Billings, who was there, but he's hurt, they're like not good players, like objectively. The offensive line, they should be able to run the ball. They should have a great running back. They should be able to run the ball. Instead, this team is built like they play in Indy. This team's built like the Colts in 2004. Like, I don't get it. It's just weird, man. It just doesn't make sense. This is not the Bears. So, at number 22, I think the Bears have talent. I think Caleb, he shows spurts of being a good quarterback for the future, but he also shows just glimpses of also being a little bit of a bust where he's got a little Kyler Murray to him. He's got a little Trevor Lawrence to him where, you know, like sometimes it's like, why is he not better? It feels like he's going to his own rhythm, his own beat of the drum. I do like what Thomas Brown has done in terms of increasing the quick passing game, increasing the rhythm of the offense, getting DJ Moore involved, getting Keenan Allen involved, and running the offense through those guys. But man, this team is built poorly. They're not coached well. They're here because of their talent and their recent performance, but I don't feel good about the Bears, really. At number 21, Jameis Winston and the Cleveland Browns. Jameis had the most Jameis Winston game in NFL history, including his little, whatever that was on the Monday Night Football graphic where he was dancing and flipping the football around. That was amazing. But then you had the game itself where he threw not one, not two, not three, not four, not five, 6 touchdowns, 4 to his team, 2 to the other team. He threw 3 picks. He threw damn near 500 fucking yards. And here's the thing, guys. Jameis Winston was actually playing, I thought, really, really well. He had the interceptions for touchdowns, and it's kind of crazy. I don't know why Jameis is the quarterback that most consistently throws pick sixes. Like, I don't know why a lot of his interceptions end up being touchdowns. Like, I don't know what it is about Jameis, but, like, a lot of quarterbacks throw picks. Like, Cousins threw 4 picks in the game. He threw 1 pick six, okay? But, like, you don't always see guys just get pick sixed all the time. You know what I mean? Jameis just weirdly, strangely always gets pick sixed. I don't know why. But the thing is, like, he must have thrown like 30 like A footballs, like bullets, dots. Like, he threw a lot of really good passes in that game, man. And he was carrying their team, to be quite honest with you. Like, they threw the ball like 55 times. You shouldn't have to throw the ball 55 times in a game with your backup quarterback. Like, that should not be it. And I think that's honestly, you know what I think it is? I think it's Kevin Stefanski just like calling as many plays, passing plays as possible, and this staff calling as many pass plays as possible, Dorsey, just to like show the ownership what they can do with a decent quarterback. Because I think they're trying to showcase that with Joe Flacco and Jameis Winston, they have a good offense. Like, objectively, top 10 offense in football with a competent pocket passing quarterback. These are like Winston and Flacco, especially, like Flacco now, but like, these guys are not top 15 quarterbacks in football. As much as we love Jameis, right? These guys are not top 15 quarterbacks in football. They are a little throwback, and that is kind of sometimes a good thing in this NFL because I feel like they understand the drop back pass game and how to operate and how to be in it more than a lot of these quarterbacks in the NFL that might even be better than them, right? Because those players are more athletic. Those players are better in like play action settings or whatever, RPO settings, things like that, quick passing games. But, Jameis is a really good drop back passer. There's no doubt. And he's a good play action passer too. But the thing is, like, Stefanski is showing to us what he can do with a good quarterback. What he can do is somebody that's competent. And that's just showcasing to the ownership how terrible Deshaun Watson is. How bad Deshaun Watson is. Imagine if they had Baker, right? Like, what this team could be or what this team would be. Jerry Jeudy, all of a sudden, he has transformed into Alabama Jerry Jeudy. Just absolutely, I didn't think he had that in him, that performance. And in 2 weeks in a row against good defenses, he was unbelievable. Elijah Moore looked great. David Njoku, we know, is a dog, drops the odd pass, but also makes some incredible plays. The O-line's looking better, I feel like, even with the injuries at tackle. And, Nick Chubb, I thought got outplayed by Jerome Ford. Defensively, they were a hint disappointing, but I thought that their corners played really well. I thought a big part they were really competitive in the game was because of the man coverage they played. And I thought that gave Bo Nix a lot of problems, but the Denver Broncos eventually kind of figured it out in terms of play calling, sequencings, things like that. Sean Payton just outcoached the defense. But, Cleveland is so much fun to watch. Jameis is so much fun to watch. I love watching this team. It's just that they got to examine, this Deshaun Watson situation. I really hope that Winston might be the quarterback next year or something because I can't do it with Watson anymore, bro. I just can't do it when we know what this team could be without him. It's just so frustrating. At number 20, the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams are at 20. I don't think this is a good football team. I think they're still being pretty overrated. I think defensively, they've got a young defensive line that is energetic, that is explosive. Fisk, Verse, Turner. Like, they're pretty good to get to the quarterback. But defensively, their linebackers can't move. They can't run. They can't cover. Their secondary is the slowest secondary in football. They can't play a hint of man coverage. And in zone, like, if you got yards after catch, you're going to do damage. And it feels like teams can lean on them and run the ball on them if they have that advantage and they're a good running team. Offensively, they can't find any sort of rhythm blocking for Stafford. Stafford, because of it, is always under duress. Puka Nacua is an animal, but Cooper Kupp is kind of like, he's closer to Austin Collie than 09 Wes Welker. Let's just put it that way. And really besides that, you got Tutu Atwell, you got Kobe Parkinson, you got Tyler Johnson, like DeMarcus Robinson, like a bunch of guys. Like, let's be fair. Kyron Williams is even kind of a guy. I understand that he produces in fantasy, but he's not like Saquon Barkley. Let's be fair. The offensive line, though, is the biggest disappointment because they spent a lot of capital and a lot of money and a lot of investment in this line, and it is not paying off. So at number 20, I think the Rams right now are overrated. If it's not for Nacua and Stafford, even McVay is overrated. Like, let's be honest. Like, is he really a top 5 coach right now? To me, he's getting outcoached by the Rizzler and Nick Sirianni. Like, I don't know, bro. At number 19, the Atlanta Falcons. They're basically a lot like the Rams. I just feel like their offense is a little bit better in terms of, like, I think their run game is more consistent. I think Bijan is just a special player. And I think Drake London is really good. Mooney is good. The problem is Stafford's a lot better than Cousins. Like, Cousins, I don't know if he's hurt or what it is, but his arm is completely gone. Like, he has no power on his ball at all. That being said, it feels like he's really struggled against good defenses that can pressure him, and that's been the story. The offensive line in Atlanta is overrated from a drop back pass perspective. It definitely is. They are relying on play action. They are a good team when they can run the ball, but Their defense is really why I moved them up, to be honest. I thought Atlanta's defense played really well against the Chargers. The Chargers have been playing well offensively. Herbert's been one of the best quarterbacks in football. Ladd McConkey did have a good day, but otherwise they couldn't run the ball in Atlanta, and they couldn't really find anyone other than McConkey. And I think sometimes you got to kind of break in certain aspects of your defensive game plan in order to succeed. And I felt like Atlanta was much better in terms of their coverages. I thought they were much better in terms of their run defense, their pressure. Their interior got a lot of looks at Herbert and sacks and plays there. And so I was impressed by Atlanta's defense. I think that could carry over against Minnesota. I'm really intrigued by this upcoming week. I think Raheem Morris threw a curveball from the bye week onto their opponent in LA. Now, can they continue that against the Vikings? But that's why I moved them up, because I thought the defense looked pretty good. At number 18, the San Francisco 49ers. It was pretty predictable that they were going to get annihilated by Buffalo in the snow. First of all, Brock Purdy is not a good weather quarterback in terms of a bad weather setting. They had so many injuries entering the game, including some of their best players like Trent Williams and Nick Bosa. And it felt like as soon as McCaffrey went down, the game was over. Like there was just an air taken out of the team that was noticeable. They actually were playing pretty good early in the game. You know, defensively, they forced a 3-and-out early. Offensively, they were moving the ball. I feel like they didn't punt until like their 5th possession of the game, but they only managed to have 3 points up into that point. They fumbled at the 1-yard line with Kyle Juszczyk. So the 49ers, you know, they just were not built for that game with the current injuries that they have. Moving forward, we're going to see them maybe get a little bit healthier, which is going to obviously help them. These past 2 weeks against elite opponents, 2 top 5 teams in the NFL on the road, were terrible spots for the most injured team in the NFL. Brock Purdy did not play against the Packers, and then this past week, Brock Purdy played, but it was in a game where Brock Purdy couldn't really make a difference, right? So now it feels like we'll see what happens with Trent, with his situation, with his family. That, again, like the Niners are the unluckiest team I've maybe ever seen in my life this year. Like the Madden curse has hit heavy. The Super Bowl hangover has hit heavy for them. But, you know, like if they can get Bosa back, it feels like Greenlaw is going to practice again this week. Hufanga is going to practice again this week. It looks like they're going to get healthier on defense with Lenore, Ward, etc. So their defense could be pretty healthy entering this game against Chicago. And offensively, as long as they have Purdy, they have, you know, Debo, Kittle, they have, maybe Trent, it feels like they can still move the ball a bit. So the Niners, I don't think it depends on injuries, right? Like they're not out of this thing yet because their division is so bad, but like I'm not giving up here on this team in terms of in the race, but I definitely feel like it's going to take, you know, a huge turnaround, a huge effort that I'm not sure they have, probably because they probably just feel like this season has been so unlucky that like, let's just move on to next year. Like, let's sim the offseason. Let's get to next season already. Like, that's kind of the vibe this team is giving off. But at the same time, it does feel like these players are returning. So at number 18, I have the Niners. At number 17, the Cincinnati Bengals. Cincinnati is at 17 because Joe Burrow is playing unbelievable. This is the only quarterback that has like this touchdown to interception ratio through this point in the season that has a losing record. It's actually crazy. They probably have the best passing game in football. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Gesicki, Chase Brown, Yossi Voss, Tanner Hudson. Like their passing game has been fucking awesome. I love watching them because it's very much Peyton Manning-esque. And Joe Burrow's made some crazy plays off schedule as well. The Chase Brown, I think, has had a great year, and he's continuing to play well as their lead back. Their defense is the worst in the league. Like, they are so bad. I mean, it's unbelievable how bad they are. They can't sustain a pass rush. They constantly give up yards after catch. They can't tackle. I mean, you can throw a screen on every play against them, and it will work. Like, Arthur Smith was just throwing wide receiver screens, tight end screens, fullback, running back screens, like everything possible. Then Russell Wilson was breaking sacks and throwing darts like he was in 2015. Like, it was unbelievable. Like, this defense is so bad. Their corners are terrible right now. So at number 17, the Bengals have the worst defense and the best passing offense, and that's why they're around average. At number 16, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Bucs could be anywhere from here to like 13 or 12, in my opinion. It kind of depends on your perspective. I just don't really trust the defense enough for me to move them up past this point. I thought their offense also had one of their worst games of the season against Carolina, despite, running the ball exceptionally well and scoring enough points to win. I felt like their rhythm was just not there. And they had like 400 yards in the game. But the passing game was off to me. Like, it just felt off. And maybe that was Carolina's game plan, understanding this team, understanding their personnel, all that sort of stuff, the Canales advantage. Maybe that was what it was. Baker, to me, has been a top 6 or 7 quarterback in football. He deserves to be in the MVP conversation in terms of, like, that next level of guys. Like, not Allen, Saquon, but, like, after that, I think he's really put together an awesome season. Even in his worst performance, he found a way to win that game and put the team on his back and have game-winning drives. Mike Evans is still unbelievable. I hope he gets 1,000 yards. Bucky Irving is, right now, one of the best running backs in football. Their O-line is really good. Liam Cohen, I love as a play caller. And they're getting enough plays from Cade Otton, Sterling Shepard, and these guys to move the chains. I miss Chris Godwin, though. I really do. Defensively, their run defense has been a bit better lately, but their pass defense still struggles. Their coverage is still bad, especially in the middle of the field. And they have to blitz to get pressure. That's just a concern. Like, it opens them up to too many different avenues for teams to pass the ball. And it feels like a lot of teams just know how to attack Bulls' coverages at this point. Like, he needs to start throwing some curveballs out there. So at number 16, if Tampa can figure out their defense a bit more, they could become a really big dark horse, in my opinion, because their quarterback, their running game, and their offense in general gives them a chance in each and every outing. At number 15, the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals are at 15, and the reason why I moved them up is because their defense, to me, I think it's legit. Like, I think their defense is legit. I'm not saying they're elite, but the facts speak for themselves, man. Like, this is such a well put together, chemistry-filled, coordinated defense. I think Gannon has been one of the Coach of the Year candidates that does not get considered. His defensive organization, his team leadership, he's been fantastic. And their blitzes against Minnesota were just getting Darnold destroyed. I thought they did a great job on defense all day, pretty much. Their run defense lately has been awesome. And they're flying around, and they're being very chaotic, and they're fun to watch defensively because they're creative and they're different. And that's what I love to see, man. It gives off some Patriot Belichick type vibes where they don't have the best individuals, but you put them together and they're playing great football. Offensively, as the more underwhelming unit, Kyler kind of underwhelming. Passing game in general, other than Trey McBride, underwhelming, right? Offensively, they have to run the ball to be successful, and they're able to run the ball pretty well against most opponents. Even Minnesota, they ran the ball better than expected. A lot of short passes from Kyler in that game. I think if the Cardinals are going to win their division, Kyler needs to have more put the team on his back type of performances. You couple that with this defense right now, you can win games, but it's just a little bit too run game oriented, in my opinion, right now. At number 14, the Seattle Seahawks. Seahawks are at 14, and we'll see who wins this game this week. I would probably lean towards Arizona right now just because Seattle won the first game, and it's in Arizona this time. And I feel like Arizona's probably going to get their comeuppance, but Seattle, they somehow won that game against the Jets. They had a really bad special teams performance. Geno, a little bit up and down. Seattle is just such a strange team because defensively, they're ascending. They're playing well. I believe in their defense. I like their 1-2 punch at cornerback. I love at safety. I think they figured out their linebacking duo, and their defensive line, I think, low-key been one of the best in football lately, especially led by Leonard Williams, who's a borderline Defensive Player of the Year candidate. McDonald has this team really playing well on defense, and that's keeping them in games. Offensively, they just have not a lot of rhythm, not a lot of sequencing, not a lot of consistency. It's a lot of 2-minute drives. It's a lot of explosive plays. It's not a lot of consistent driving the football. And once they drive the football, it's bad in the red zone. So the Seahawks, if they just had a little bit better offensive line, if they were just a little bit more consistent, and I think their inconsistency is driven by the offensive line being bad. I really think that's what it is. I don't think it's Geno. I think it's the O-line. I think people are putting their onus on the wrong spot. I think it's the O-line. I don't think it's Geno. That's my opinion. At number 14. At number 13, the Washington Commanders. The Commanders kind of feel like a better version of Arizona. It's kind of what they feel like. Like, the offense is they can run the ball, just like Arizona, and their offense is predicated on the run. But it feels like they've got a little bit more out of their passing game. Like, Daniels, he's just been a little bit more consistent than Kyler throwing the ball in terms of when they need to make a big explosive play. I think Kyler's more dynamic. That's arguable, I guess, but and McLaurin is a big thing too. Like, McLaurin has been one of the best receivers in football this year, and that's kind of a suction for defenses. Like, they're having to slow down McLaurin, which opens up other players like Zach Ertz and Noah Brown and all that stuff. But their run game is so dynamic. We saw that against Tennessee. Like, their read option, their zone read was phenomenal, and they didn't have answers for that, and that set up everything else, their quick screens, all that sort of stuff, which they're very good at, and Cliff did a great job. The O-line is solid. The defense, I feel like, is very much like Arizona, where they don't have a lot of individual talent, but they're well coordinated. They don't beat themselves. They make you drive the football. I think they're a little bit worse than the Cardinals defense, but they've shown some performances. They've shown a lot of explosiveness to be able to turn the ball over, to be able to, play with the lead and play with the game script. So yeah, they kind of remind me of each other, but I think the Commanders' offense has just been more consistent, which is kind of the difference. But Washington, Arizona, Seattle, Tampa, that feels like a range of NFC teams that are interchangeable for me, and that's number 13 is the Commanders. At number 12, I actually have the Miami Dolphins. And again, guys, this is not standings based. This is power rankings, okay? At number 12, the Dolphins. I feel like the Dolphins are like more talented than Seattle, more talented than Arizona, more talented than Washington. I think their offense is top 5 or 6 in the league, as long as they don't play in the snow or in really cold weather. I think Tua has played really well since he's returned for the most part, especially against bad opponents. The O-line has been the best O-line of the McDaniel era. A-Shane has been great. Tyreek is a little bit washed or hurt, but he's not quite the same player, but he's still doing enough. Jalen Waddle, inconsistent. Jonnu Smith, animal. But the offense as a whole, and for McDaniel right now, they're putting up points, and they figured it out in the second half against Green Bay. They were able to move the ball really effectively, even in the cold. So I expect them to bounce back this week against the Jets. Defensively, they have their spots where they're really good in their pass rush, and they're very chaotic, and they're able to turn the ball over and get sacks and get pressure. We saw that against the Rams. We saw that against the Patriots, especially where they were able to dominate the game up front. Their secondary is not the best, but I think it's smart and savvy. So the Dolphins still have a chance for the playoffs. I doubt they make it, but still, these are power rankings, not standings. At number 11, I've got the Texans. The Texans are one of the ugliest teams to watch in the NFL, and I think that's why people are so low on them, because the expectations for the Texans were to be a very fun team to watch, high-flying, high-scoring, beautiful scheme. But what they really are is a version of like the Steelers. They're ugly offensively. They're very explosive but inconsistent. Their defense is dominant up front, but they have some leakages in the run and the pass game at times, right? They're kind of like the Steelers right now, but I see the Texans with a lot of upside because we've seen Stroud play at an elite level. Even this game this past week against Jacksonville, I thought he had some really awesome moments of looking like one of the best quarterbacks in football. But they were a little bit too conservative. They took their foot off the gas. They kind of, defensively, they were less aggressive, right? They kind of let Mac do what he wanted. They kind of allowed him to go down the field and dink and dunk. And it was just like they were just trying to escape with a win, and they kind of closed it when they needed to. And that's a sign of a good team. That's very Chiefs-like, right? But that's not what we want to see from a team like the Texans. We want to see them dominate a team like Jacksonville, especially with their backup in, right? So they've had injuries, all that sort of stuff. But Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz, Joe Mixon, If they can figure out the offensive line just a bit through this bye week, they can come through this bye week. They take on the Ravens, they take on the Chiefs, and we can truly see, Miami even, we can truly see if this team can make a push in the playoffs. If this offensive line and this scheme and this coach, this offense, can just put things together a little bit better through the bye week, now is the time. They've got a defense that can be dominant even against really good quarterbacks and really good offenses like Detroit and Buffalo. So at number 11, I have the Texans. I'm not giving up on this team, but I am lowering them because they're just not dominating bad teams. They're letting teams hang around. They're not very pretty to watch. There's a lot of reasons to be a little depressed on them, so I get it. But at the same time, there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic. At number 10, I've got the Broncos, who are not as talented as Houston, but they're just more well put together. Their offensive scheme, I really think Sean Payton's done an unbelievable job. I think he's the coach of the year, maybe. I mean, I really do. Like, you look at him and what he's done with Bo Nix. I think Bo Nix has got a good arm. Bo Nix is a good mobile athlete. He's mostly accurate, but like, I think he struggles with some things, especially pressure. And I think that, when teams are able to play that tight coverage on Denver, some of those gimmies are not there for him, and I feel like he's a little bit more scatterbrained. But I think what he's been able to do inside Sean Payton's offense, it just speaks volumes to the coaching that he's gotten. The offensive line has been awesome. I thought they struggled a little bit more with Cleveland than other teams, but that's to be expected. Their run game is really not good. I think they need to give Jaleel McLaughlin the football more because he's their most explosive, most effective back. Like, Estime and Javonte are just not efficient at all. So give McLaughlin 15 carries a game. Allow those guys to be the short yardage guys if you want. Sutton is still a dog. Vele is a decent player. Mims had a huge touchdown. Franklin's fast. They've got plenty of guys. They even cut Josh Reynolds because of all the different guys that they're featuring that are young and hungry. Defensively, they're very good, but if they roll out Levi Wallace one more week, they're going to get absolutely dominated by a decent passer of the football and a decent receiving core. They've got to figure out the injuries defensively. I thought this was one of their worst defensive performances of the season, run and pass game, but especially the pass game. It was bad on the back end. At number 9, the Los Angeles Chargers, Justin Herbert. I like the Chargers because this is a Chargers team that doesn't beat themselves, and they're capable of beating teams that want to beat themselves, right? Like the Atlanta Falcons. They don't turn it over. They have the lowest interception percentage Herbert does in football. They protect the passer well. They don't really fumble the ball very much. Their defense plays, very sound. They don't allow a lot of big plays. They stop the run. They rush the quarterback. And they got 4 picks and a pick 6. And the Chargers do have a top 10 defense in football. That's not debatable. I don't think they're dominant, but they're damn sound. Like, they're good on third down. They're creative enough. They're good in the red zone. They stop the run. Herbert with McConkey has grown to be a great connection. And if they can get more out of this run game, I think that they can really elevate this offense. The run game has not been very good lately. The last month or so, they've been pretty awful. So they need to get that going to sustain more offense and help out Herbert. But I like this team. I think they're a dark horse at number 9. At number 8, the Minnesota Vikings. Who I think I dropped one spot, not really partly because the Vikings didn't look very good against Arizona. I thought they should have lost to the Cardinals. I thought they were the worst team on Sunday, but they managed to win. So I give them credit for that, and Darnold being able to bounce back from some, lack of success early on. Flores and O'Connell are awesome. I've talked about this team. Like, I love their defensive scheme. Obviously, I'm kind of biased because Flores was a Patriot guy, and it has very much the makings of a Patriot defensive scheme. Their offense, O'Connell was even drafted by the Patriots, but it's got the Rams and 49er flavor. There's a lot that I like about the coaching of this team because I'm influenced by those type of styles. But Aaron Jones, stop fumbling a little bit. That would be nice. The offensive line is kind of my big problem, along with Darnold, who's a little bit inconsistent. But Jefferson's awesome. Addison's good. Hawkinson's still pretty good. If they can run the ball consistently, that can take pressure off the O-line, take pressure off Darnold, and their defense will make plays. But, they've got to stop the run or else they don't have success on defense. That's something I've noticed. When they dominate in the run game defensively, they're really hard to beat. But when they don't, they're they're kind of breaking their own defense because their coverage and their back end is not fast enough and talented enough to play a lot of man. So they play a lot of zone. And I think when they zone blitz, it gives up some leaks and it allows teams to kind of dink and dunk their way down the field and find explosive yak plays. Like we saw with the Lions and like we saw a little bit with the Cardinals, but they held their own in the red zone. Minnesota won that game because of turnovers, because of red zone, because of things like that. They did not really play as the better team in between the 20s, but sometimes that doesn't matter. So at number 8, I got the Vikings. I still think they're one of the dark horses in the NFC. At number 7, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, the reason I moved the Steelers above the Vikings, I saw, Russ played really well. I think that the Steelers offense is ascending while the Vikings is kind of getting a little bit worse or declining. And I feel like both defenses are relatively similar. They have cracks. I feel like you can move the ball on them. You can put up yardage, but it's hard for you to not turn it over. It's hard for you to sustain drives because of the negative plays they cause. It's hard for you in the red zone because they're dominant up front. And the Steelers and the Vikings have similar vibes defensively, in my opinion. Now, it comes down to which team is playing better offensively. I thought the Steelers played better against the Bengals. They played awesome. Russ looked the best he's looked all year. Their run game was, keeping the Bengals off balance. Their screen game, which has been a huge element lately, has been phenomenal. They're running play action. So the Steelers, I don't love this team as a contender, but I certainly respect them. Okay, because and the biggest reason this year I think they're better is a lot of people are saying, it's, I don't know what people are saying really. Is it Russ versus Rudolph? I think that's the most common thing. But my opinion is Arthur Smith. That's the biggest thing. I think Arthur Smith is a good football coach. That he's a good offensive coordinator. And I think he's a better head coach than Raheem Morris. It's just so happened that Raheem Morris had Kirk Cousins and, Arthur Smith had Desmond Ridder. I think there's a little bit of a difference there. But that's the reason for me. And Steeler fans thinks I hate this team. I don't hate this team. I just kind of view them as a team that is limited in terms of I don't see them getting to the AFC Championship. I don't see them getting the Super Bowl. So if I don't see that, because I think, the offense is a little bit too inconsistent. They look amazing against the Bengals, but so did the Raiders at times, right? Like the Bengals defense is really, really bad, right? So, and then the Steelers, they don't have the defense where it's like, it looked like they could have, but they haven't been this amazingly dominant defense either. So I just don't know where this team, when you're telling me, okay, in the playoffs, they're playing Lamar, they're playing Josh, they're playing Pat, they're playing Justin. Am I going to be able to pick them? I just don't know, man. Like, that's the thing. So I have them at 7 because it's not really about their record. It's not really about how they're playing. It's more so of a projection of, okay, if this is the playoffs, who am I picking? Right? And that's kind of how I see it with their ranking. I hope that explains my take on the Steelers. And you may disagree with that, but that's where I stand. All right. At number 6, the Baltimore Ravens. I'm not really going to get too crazy about them losing to the Eagles, who I think are a great football team. I think they could have won this game. I think that's what many people will overlook. Justin Tucker has been so bad this season, and I think the depressing fact of Baltimore having the most reliable kicker to now one of the least reliable kickers has made them lose football games this year. And Harbaugh needs to question that moving forward because Tucker missed multiple field goals and I believe an extra point, which put this team in a lack of rhythm and in a spot in this game where he could have had the lead. He could have had a little bit of a hold on that game in the game script against Philadelphia and forced the Eagles to play left-handed. But instead, Tucker's inability to make key, crucial kicks put the Eagles in a position where they could stay in the game and play towards their strength, right? So that was big. That being said, Lamar in the passing game did not have any sort of rhythm against Philadelphia. Henry was outperformed by Saquon. And defensively, the Ravens, I thought, held their own against the Eagles. And I actually think the Ravens defense is playing much, much better lately. And I think they will continue to do that. But I actually think the offense is starting to get a little bit slowed down by like teams kind of figure out, what they kind of are a little bit with Derrick Henry now. So I think it's just bound to happen near this area of the season, December, January. Offenses tend to slow down. Defenses tend to trend up. If their offense can still be a top 3 unit and they can couple that with a defense that never should have been as bad as they were, and they can be a little bit more middling, this is certainly still a team in the AFC that can make the AFC Championship. So at number 6, the Ravens. At number 5, I've got the Packers. I think the Packers are that 5th team in the NFL. I love their offensive line. I think they run the ball well. I think they overpower you. I think they protect Love exceptionally well. I like their receiving core with Reed and Watson and Dobbs. When it's those 3 especially. Kraft has impressed me. He's a much better player than I ever would have thought. Jacobs is a dog. Although his numbers are not always the most efficient like Aaron Jones, but he has an impact on the game. He has a power. He has a physicality that I think the Packers have brought to their team this year. And Matt LaFleur, he's just been brilliant at the start of games offensively in recent weeks. Defensively, they're opportunistic. They're definitely more sound, and they're definitely more physical than they've been in past seasons. Their run yardage allowed is much better. There's things to like about that. Their pass rush needs to be better. I think they were good against Miami. That needs to continue. Guys like Lucas Van Ness, for example. The secondary, Jair needs to be there because they're definitely leaky in that back end at cornerback. But when they're healthy, this is a very complete team. As long as Love is playing not turnover worthy prone, not stupid, and he plays within the system and he's making those big throws, this is a very good team and a very hard team to beat and the best dark horse in football. The clear top 4 teams in the NFL. At number 4, Kansas City. Kansas City, I think, is clearly number 4 because they're not very dynamic. They're not very explosive, but what they do better than anybody is they don't really beat themselves. They force you to beat them. And Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo are the best coaching duo in football. Their O-line, especially tackle, has been really bad protecting Mahomes. Mahomes, at times, has kind of played into it to a negative. The run game is a bit spotty lately. They are very success rate oriented. They're very like 3 yards a carry, 3 yards a carry, 3 yards a carry. That's solid, but they don't have a lot of explosiveness. Can Pacheco bring that back? Noah Gray has been great, but Kelsey has slowed down a lot. And I think Kelsey officially is no longer like a really good tight end. I think he's still good, right? He can still contribute, but I don't think he's a horse that you can rely on. The wide receiving core, Worthy has just been, I think they should lower his snaps. I really do, because I don't think him and Mahomes really have it. Feels like every time they try to make a play with him, it just doesn't happen. It's very rare. I would rather play Watson more often, to be honest with you, at this rate. I just think they have more rapport. And I think that Kansas City is more about rapport through the receiving core. Like, Juju should be playing more snaps, in my opinion, because he has a good connection with Mahomes. I think D-Hop has been decent, but, I get it. The team doesn't really have a lot of speed. So it's a very slow, methodical offense that doesn't bring a lot of explosiveness in the run or the pass game, because Worthy hasn't really been that guy for them, and Mahomes has not been clicking on those throws. And the offensive line doesn't hold up long enough, right? Mahomes has also been more turnover worthy prone, and the defense is the biggest worry, right? Like the defense is not rushing the passer well, so that's causing them to blitz. And when they blitz, their secondary is not playing as well in man or zone, and it feels like they're giving up more explosives, more avenues to get the ball out against these blitzes. Like, it felt like every time the Chiefs would blitz last year, they would have it covered up. They would tackle. The ball would go to the flat. They would tackle. Like, now I'm watching them, and it's like, there's a guy open. There's a guy open here. There's a guy open there. Like, what's going on, right? So, at number 4, I've got the Chiefs. I feel like they're very flawed, but they just keep winning whether it's through the refs, whether it's through Taylor Swift voodoo, whether it's through Mahomes on third down and at the end of the game, whether it's through the defense, they just find a way to win, man. So you got to give them credit. At number 3, I got the Detroit Lions, surprisingly, and this has a lot to do with the current version of the Lions. Like, they've got a lot of injuries on defense, which you have to discuss, and that's lowered their power ranking for me. On top of that, I thought they played poorly against Chicago. I thought they, especially in the second half, the offense and the team in the first half was dominant. There's no question about that. They were thoroughly dominant. But the second half was depressing. Usually they put that team away. Usually they dominate that team, and they didn't do that for me. So at number 3, I've got Detroit. At number 2, the Philadelphia Eagles. I got the Eagles. At number 2, Big Al's Eagles. Shout out Big Al. The Eagles are the most talented team in football, and they can brutalize you, and they can wear you down, and they can just bully you. And this is, in my opinion, a lot like the 2022 team. They are very similar. I think their defense is actually the opposite. It's flipped. Like, the defense is a lot better in the secondary than they were in 2022 and much worse up front. And I think that may be a good thing for the playoffs. But the offense is pretty much the exact same team. They just have Saquon Barkley instead of Jason Kelce. And I think the running back makes up for maybe a little bit worse offensive line, right? Jalen Hurts is maybe a little bit worse too. But they're such a run-heavy team. They're such a brutal team, a throwback team. Their defense is, right now, they're playing the best football in the league. There's no denying that. And Saquon might be the best football player in the NFL, if it were not for, at number 1, Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. If I'm picking a team to win the Super Bowl right now, it's not the Eagles, it's not the Lions, it's the Buffalo Bills, which is why I have them at number 1, and I've made that decision. We'll see how they play against the Lions in a couple of weeks. That game will be in Detroit. I think Detroit will be favored, so we'll see how that goes. I think otherwise they should sweep their schedule. This is a little bit of a tricky game going to the Rams this week, but I see them as a team that's going to win the Super Bowl because I think they've got a lot of talent, a lot of chemistry, a lot of experience, and I think they've found a rhythm offensively through Brady's scheme. They're balanced on offense. They got Milano back on defense. They've got a great cornerback trio. They finally can play man coverage. They can commit to the run defense when they need to. They've got a deep rotation of defensive line. They've got one of the best offensive lines in football. And Josh Allen's the best player in the league. And I think ultimately, when it comes down to the biggest stage and the biggest games, I feel like Josh Allen is going to outperform Jared Goff. Josh Allen is going to outperform Jalen Hurts. And that's what it comes down to, man, at the end of the day. I'd rather be able to count on McDermott defensively to scheme around slowing down the Lions or scheme around slowing down Saquon, right? Than me having to deal with Josh Allen rolling to the right, running along the sideline and throwing the ball across his body for a 60-yard bomb that is uncoverable. You can't coach against that. So to me, it's kind of like what Mahomes has done over the past few years, where it's like the Eagles were better than the Chiefs on paper. The Niners were better than the Chiefs on paper. But at the end of the day, the best quarterback is going to take it. And to me, I think that's Josh. So I'm going with the Bills right now. Thank you guys for watching. Gronk, spike the like button, and don't forget to subscribe. It's Mitch. We'll see you later. Deuces.